South of Midnight is perfect for a long weekend gaming session. It's a competent action-adventure game reminiscent of something like Hi-Fi Rush, owed to the similar level structure, the combination of light platforming and combat, and a story that guides the adventure. Over the course of its 10-hour runtime, you'll venture through the deep south of America, rich in hollers, jazz cafes, swamps, plantations, steamboats, and other iconography. But there's more to this world than shantytowns and country roads as you follow protagonist Hazel in her desperate search to find her mother. Compulsion Games has interjected the adventure with heaps of southern-inspired mythos and creatures, creating new takes on tales of cryptos found all across the Bible Belt. Pacing remains the game's greatest strength, juggling a simple but enjoyable combat system with light platforming and exploration, both of which constantly deliver a feeling of progression while mirroring Hazel's desire to find her mother. Despite these positives though, it's hard to shake the feeling that South of Midnight never truly expands on its gameplay, sinking into routine like a mud pit, putting extra pressure on the story to deliver, and I'm not quite sure it does in some instances. It's a title I strongly recommend playing on Game Pass, as I can't really say it's worth $40 outright, more like $20 or $30. However, a full purchase isn't out of the question either if you've been excited for this one, especially if the new takes on Southern legends resonates with you more than me, as I'm someone who's brand new to these tales. And with those introductory thoughts, I'm opening up the spoiler warning from here on out, although I will be keeping them to a minimum this time around. South of Midnight follows the story of Hazel, a high school track star living in the Deep South with her mom Lacey. After a meteorologically on-brand hurricane plows through the quiet town of Prospero, washing away Hazel's family home with her mother in it, she sets out along the river to find her mom. The adventure begins with a romp through traditional Deep South iconography, trailers, farms, plantation homes, and more. However, as the journey progresses, Hazel continuously finds herself coming face to face with weirder and weirder creatures, some of which are inspired takes on geographically relevant cryptids, as I've said before. Haints are malevolent spirits that make up the basic enemy type that define most combat encounters. However, other more specific tales abound, such as Two-Toed Tom, the Cajun Bigfoot, and Huggin' Molly. To be honest, the portrayal of these folklores, as good as they are going to mean more to gamers that are familiar with them. As for me, I don't reside in the Deep South of America, and so many of these encounters didn't hit with any sort of impact. In fact, only Hugging Molly was a concept I had heard of before. You know, she's that scary witchy woman living in the woods who kidnaps children that run away from their homes. It's a lesson that parents tell their young kids to keep them close by their side. Outside of that, I wasn't familiar with their tales, and that did diminish their impact. That's not the game's fault, but it will limit its relevancy and therefore potential for connection for many players. Of course, the game counteracts the player's potential lack of awareness by tying these cryptids into the overall story. You see, Hazel isn't just your average teenager, she's a weaver, a wielder of mysterious power who's capable of sewing tears in the tapestry of the world. In other words, she's a healer, a being who goes around mending the wounds caused by trauma in order to bring people comfort. She's like a therapist with weapons. To bring about this peace, Hazel enters into areas inflicted with stigma, a physical manifestation of pain, and defeats the evil spirits that lurk there. Expelling these creatures allows Hazel to get glimpses of the moments of pain as they happened, painting a picture of turmoil for the character she's trying to help. She bottles these traumatic moments up and releases them to a bottle tree to be cleansed, mending the suffering. And again, I'm trying to keep the spoilers light, so I'll discuss only the first example of this in detail. So Hazel meets a man who lives in mental anguish over the loss of his younger brother. At first, it appears as if the younger boy simply went missing, but as you uncover more, you learn the truth. The youngest brother had a mental illness that made him stand out at school and became a magnet for torment and bullying. The bullying of the younger brother uprooted the family's world every so often, forcing them to move to escape the ridicule, but it followed wherever they went. This tale is explored through the perspective of the older brother though, showing how he grew to resent his younger brother for constantly forcing him to abandon his school and friends, embarrassing him in the process. Eventually, the elder snapped, trapping his sibling in a hollowed out tree and leaving him there to die. Realizing that his brother had abandoned him created an enormous pain, and the magic of the forest fused the two living objects, the boy and the tree, into one. Thus, the first person you help is a tree man. Every time you finish a fight in this area, you get a little cutscene showing a moment of pain. And since you're a weaver, it's your job to help out these poor people. Well, maybe not help. I'm not convinced that South of Midnight does a good enough job of conveying exactly how Hazel is helping these people. Since her healing powers come from magic, it's easy to hand wave away years of trauma through gameplay instead of character-driven storytelling. You beat some haints, you watch a few memories, and you outrun a purple fog, and boom! Decades of torment and trauma is just cured, I guess. I can only think of one instance where your actions as a weaver are shown to bring about peace and comfort for the afflicted. Outside of that, it's hard to tell if you've genuinely made a difference in these characters' lives, or if you simply completed the gameplay objectives that were placed in front of you. The game's excellent pacing actually works against it in this way, as you aren't given enough time to witness the fruits of your labor, as instead, Hazel pushes on to continue the search for her mother. That was my main problem with the story. The moments of intended emotional weight are undercut and sometimes come off as trauma dumping since your efforts are so often glanced over. Now, I didn't personally feel this way, but I could see how this may cheapen the storytelling for some players, conjuring up sad imagery simply to get a reaction from the player instead of using it to build proper character arcs. I guess they just wanted to keep the story focused on Hazel and her mother while finding time to inject as many cryptids as possible, so I guess it makes sense. At least the talking catfish offered up some comedic relief. Seriously, he's the best character in the game if you ask me. Hazel's perfectly likable, and most of the cast is too, but this fish man, he's great. All of this story takes place in cutscenes as you travel through the linear levels. South of Midnight is masterful with its gameplay pacing, providing consistent feelings of progress and action while also giving you plenty of moments to take a break if you so desire. Moving through levels means using platforming staples like double jumps, climbing, and wall running, although the controls are a little slippery at times, which leads to some cheap damage. The bigger problem though is that South of Midnight is fearful to ever push the platforming challenge too far. A great example of this would be the wall running that's introduced fairly early. You'll find it in nearly every level, and it functions how you'd expect. Magnetize to a wall, run along it, and jump at the proper time to either begin another action or land on a safe platform. Here, you can also move up or down the wall as you run along it, a fact that the tooltip UI will remind you of constantly. However, despite this quirk being introduced at the same time as wall running, it's not until the very end of the game that you find walls that contain obstacles that will damage Hazel. The game waits until the last real levels to elevate the tension, and it's only just barely more challenging. This softness helps contribute to the great pacing, but it also ensures that the thrill of platforming will never be the driving force of the game. At the very best, you may use these simple mechanics to reach hidden alcoves where you can find upgrade materials to enhance Hazel's power in combat. These rewards are often quick divergencies off the main path before circling back onto it, making them a nice treat to venture down. Perhaps the best thing that can be said about Platforming Challenge is that mistakes will punish you in combat. Falling into water or running into a hazard leaves Hazel with some wounds, scars that are carried over into the battlefield. You see, you can only recover health during combat, so any damage you enter the fray with will endure until it ends, or you use the healing patch found within every fighting arena. This at least provides a little bit of consequence to platforming errors. It's also cool that Hazel's platforming tools are also her weapons in combat. We have a pretty basic third-person melee system here that relies on cooldown abilities to carry the player to victory. Hazel has a basic attack combo and a dodge that deals damage if timed perfectly. Outside of that, Hazel gets access to 5 other abilities including a push, a pull, a debuff spell, a temporary mind control, and an AoE attack. Juggling these maneuvers while keeping up with your dodges is critical to winning a combat encounter, and upgrading these moves outside of fights also goes a long way in helping your battle prowess. To be honest, combat has a good rhythm to it, and I did really enjoy it, although there's more to a skirmish than a good flow state. There are a few small problems in combat that occasionally annoy, like the lock on camera that didn't always guarantee that Hazel's attacks and abilities targeted the highlighted enemy, or these sweep attacks where enemies completely out of range would slide across the battlefield to land a heavy hitting attack. Those were annoying, however, I'm more inclined to come back to my biggest issue with South of Midnight, its unwillingness to evolve. There's like 6 or 7 non-boss type enemies, and you have seen them all by halfway through the game. This lack of variety really dilutes the enjoyment you get out of combat during the title's back half, especially because the game refuses to push the challenge outside of the final boss fight. I would have liked some encounters where 2 or 3 of the strongest basic enemy types were dropped into an arena at once, but I don't really remember that ever happening. Hazel continues to grow stronger through the upgrades, and eventually the enemies just can't keep up with you, and without any sort of extra animation work or flashy kills, you're not even going to get a power rush out of it, leaving combat in a flimsy state by the time the credits roll. It started off good, but it failed to evolve as my skill set and power output continued to climb through repetition and rewards. But to be fair, the boss fights were better. But I don't want to spoil them too much here. I'm showing a clip of the fight with Two-Toed Tom, who's the first boss in the game, just to give you a sample, but the main reason I did it is because, damn, how cool is it to fight a giant alligator? Or a crocodile, I don't know. Anyway, moving on, I wanted to share a few brief notes on the presentation. I could very easily see this game getting a nod at the Game Awards for art direction this year because it really is something special. They use a stop-motion animation style in the cutscenes that may annoy some, but personally I loved it. Besides this, they did a masterful job of conveying the look of Deep South geography, as I've already alluded to, particularly in the swampy areas that immediately conjure up imagery of the Everglades. The lighting work is also fantastic most of the time, perhaps a bit overkill occasionally, but usually quite good at bathing a landscape in sunset or highlighting a way forward through a dark path. The sound effects are also good. In particular, I enjoyed the sounds of bugs buzzing around the swamp, one of which was so realistic that I thought a fly was in the room with me, zooming around my headset. But the best part of the game's DNA, when it comes to presentation, had to be the soundtrack because they nailed it. It's rare for a game to utilize lyrics in their original works, but this game isn't shy about it at all. Here, take a listen.
Was my brother, Benji his name. He saw things different. He was my shame. And I said goodbye. I said farewell. I took my hammer, my ticket to hell.
There's a few songs like this throughout the game, and they just really did an awesome job with it. It felt so fresh to me to hear someone actually singing in a video game. However, not everything is sunshine and rainbows, as I did experience some technical issues. I played on a Series S, which, as I usually mention, is pretty underpowered, but I had some bad beats with South of Midnight. Occasionally, cutscenes would have a tear effect, and in one instance, a character was completely invisible. At first I thought that maybe this was another one of those folklore cryptids and that Bro was supposed to be transparent or something, like that was his power, but no, it's a bug. Completely took me out of the moment, ruining the payoff of helping this poor guy. But, you know, he didn't seem particularly grateful anyway. But worst of all were the 2 crashes I experienced at the end of Chapter 11. The game just couldn't seem to load the cutscene and the next level, resulting in 2 separate restarts, which was really annoying. I didn't lose progress, but it just takes you out of the game. So overall, I think there's a good time to be had with South of Midnight if your expectations are in the right place. Like I said, I think it's a perfectly enjoyable adventure that can be completed during a weekend or as a wind-down game after engaging with something more strenuous or demanding for hours and hours. It won't provide a lot of resistance on its normal mode, which makes me glad to see they included difficulty settings as well as a custom difficulty option. These go a long way in rewarding players who don't simply want to breeze through the game, and I heavily recommend exploring that custom option if you fit into that camp. I like to play games on normal as I assume that's the intended experience. It just feels a bit too easy here for me, so definitely check out hard mode if you want something challenging. And as for the story, well, it's not bad at all. Just a little clustered up as it tries to combine Hazel's journey to find her mother with an explanation of her powers, while also cramming in encounters with 7 different folklores. And you know, I'd be really interested to see what those more familiar with these folklore stories think about this game, but I want to also acknowledge that this game may inspire unaware players to research those tales in more detail, and I think that's pretty cool. And if they clean up the technical issues, the game will be all the better for it. So, yeah, I definitely recommend this game. If you're eagerly anticipating a next big release like Mario Kart World or Death Stranding 2 or whatever it may be, I think South of Midnight is a good game to help you pass the time as you wait for that. Thanks for watching. Alright y'all, that brings us to the end of another video. I'm glad to get this one out now because the next few months look absolutely insane. I want to play and cover Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Elden Ring Night Rain, Mario Kart World, and Death Stranding 2, which is a lot. I'm not sure I'll be able to hit them all, but I'm gonna try. As always, if you liked the video and you want to support the channel further, check out my join and super thanks button here on YouTube, or consider donating on Buy Me a Coffee. All that good stuff can be found in the description and pinned comment. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing for more, follow me on Twitter at NopNapNarp, and as always, have a nice day, and take care.